"Dad, what did you think of the $100,000 I gave you through Valerie?" asked my millionaire son, Robert, when he came to visit me for my birthday. I gave a bitter laugh. "Son, she only gave me a pair of socks." Just then, a sleek new car pulled up in front of my house, and his wife stepped out. Loyalty or betrayal? The consequences will be loud. The gift bag didn't weigh anything. I stood in the doorway of my Texas rental house, looking at the cheap plastic handles, feeling the emptiness even before I looked inside. Valerie had tossed it at me from the window of her car without making eye contact. And now, she was gone. Her taillights disappeared down the street before I could invite her in for a cup of coffee. I walked back inside my rented house and put the bag on the kitchen table. The afternoon sun slanted through the window at an angle that made everything look dusty and small. This place had 2 rooms and a kitchen that barely fit a table for 4. It wasn't like the house I had owned for 30 years. The one with the backyard where Matthew learned to throw a baseball. The one with the finished basement and the mortgage I had paid off 5 years early. I opened the bag slowly, as if it might contain something fragile. Socks. A pair of black dress socks, still attached by a plastic clip. The price tag hung from one ankle. $5.99. A discount store brand. My 62nd birthday gift. I dropped heavily into the chair. The same chair I had sat in every night for 4 years, eating dinner alone. The socks felt coarse between my fingers. I turned them over. I looked for a card, a note, anything, nothing. Just socks that Matthew, my son, my only son, apparently had asked his wife to drop off while he was extremely busy with new contracts. That was what Valerie had said, stopping her compact car with the engine running, one hand on the steering wheel, ready to leave before she had even truly arrived. "This is from Matthew. He's extremely busy with new contracts. Happy birthday." No smile, no warmth. Just words delivered like a court summons. I left the socks next to the single place setting I had laid out that morning. 1 plate, 1 fork, 1 knife. I had even used a cloth napkin, one of the nice ones from before, trying to hold on to some dignity. The casserole baking in the oven filled the small kitchen with the scent of cheese and chicken. Enough for 3 people. I had made too much food again. I always made too much. "He's building something important," I said out loud to the empty room. My voice sounded hollow. Success requires sacrifice. I get it. But I didn't get it. Not really. Not when I walked past the picture on the mantelpiece. Matthew in his graduation gown, my arm around his shoulders, both of us smiling like we'd won the lottery. That was 15 years ago, when I still had the house, when I thought I was building something for both of us. The memory arrived uninvited. Sitting in that real estate office 4 years ago, in March of 2021, watching the agent slide papers across the desk. My hand had trembled as I signed. 30 years of mortgage payments, of cutting the grass every Sunday, of Christmas lights on the eaves, reduced to signatures on documents I barely read. The agent had talked about market conditions and equity and comparable sales, but all I heard was the sound of my pen scratching the lines. Handing over my home, then the bank. 2 weeks later. I had walked in with shaking knees and walked out, having handed my son a cashier's check for $200,000. Matthew had hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. "Dad, this investment is going to change everything. Once we expand, I'll buy you a new house. Something even better. I promise." I had believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. He had a business degree from a good school, a plan, a vision. He had shown me spreadsheets and projections and letters of intent from major clients. The expansion would double his revenue in 2 years, he said. Triple it in 5. He could pay me back, and then some. 4 years later, I was still waiting in a rental house that smelled like someone else's cigarette smoke had soaked into the walls. I took the casserole out of the oven and served myself a portion that looked lonely on the plate. I sat back down at the table. The empty chair across from me seemed to grow as I ate, as if expanding to fill the space where a family should be. I had hoped Matthew would stop by. Valerie had said he was busy, but surely he would make time for his father's birthday. Surely he would want to celebrate together like we used to. The socks lay next to my plate like an accusation. $5.99. I did the math without meaning to. 200,000 divided by 599 equals... I stopped. The numbers turned my stomach. After dinner, I did the dishes slowly, watching the sky darken through the window above the sink. The water ran hot over my hands, the soap bubbles catching the last of the sunlight. This was my life now. Careful economy, quiet nights, waiting for something to change. Matthew's business was thriving. I knew that from the rare times we spoke. He'd mentioned contracts with national retailers, expansion into 3 new states, hiring more staff, success, everything we had hoped for. So why was I still here, in this rental, eating alone? The phone rang just as I pulled the plug from the drain. I dried my hands on a dish towel and answered, expecting a telemarketer or maybe a wrong number. "Dad?" Matthew's voice sounded strange, taut, squeezed in a way I had never heard before. "Hello, son. Thanks for the..." "Dad, I'm on my way over." He cut me off, the words tumbling out. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. Something in his tone, the urgency, the way he didn't wait for me to respond. "Is everything all right?" I'll be there soon. Don't go anywhere." The line went dead. I stood holding the phone, staring at the black screen, feeling my heart rate accelerate. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too quiet. Outside, a car drove past the street, the headlights sweeping across the wall. I looked at the cheap socks on the table, the photo on the mantel, the empty chair. Something was coming. Something had shifted. I could feel it in my chest, a tightness that had nothing to do with age or anxiety, and everything to do with the sound of my son's voice. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark street. Waiting for headlights to turn into my driveway, I couldn't stop moving. From the window to the kitchen and back to the window, checking my watch every 90 seconds as if that would make Matthew arrive faster. 23 minutes since the call. The casserole was cooling on the counter. I picked up the socks, put them down, picked them up again. My hands needed something to do. When the headlights finally swept across the living room wall, I was at the window before his car engine stopped. Matthew got out slowly, like a man carrying a weight on his shoulders. Even under the porch light, I could see the exhaustion etched onto his face. I opened the door before he could knock. "Hey, Dad." He walked in, and I immediately noticed that he didn't smile. He didn't make eye contact for more than a second. "Nice night?" "Is it?" I closed the door. I watched him stand in the middle of my small living room, as if he didn't know what to do with his body. "You sounded worried on the phone." "Oh, yeah." He looked around the room, really looked, taking in the cramped space, the worn furniture, the obvious difference between this place and what I used to have. His eyes stopped on the kitchen table, on the socks still lying there. He walked toward them. He picked them up. He turned them over in his hands, the price tag still dangling. His jaw tightened. He put the socks down carefully, as if they might break. "The business has been doing well," he said, not looking at me. "Really well. We closed 3 major contracts this quarter. Revenue is up 40% over last year." "That's wonderful, son. That's why I wanted to do something significant for your birthday." He turned to look at me then. and something in his expression made my chest clench. Something that would make a real difference. I waited. The room felt too warm. "What did you think of it?" The question hung between us like a trap I couldn't see. "The socks are fine. Practical. The $100,000, Dad." His voice dropped, every word deliberate. "How are you planning to use it?" The floor seemed to tilt. "Son, I don't understand. Valerie brought me socks. Just socks." "That's impossible." Matthew pulled out his phone with hands that shook slightly. "I gave her $100,000 in cash this morning." "Cash, Dad." I counted it myself. "I have a picture." He held the phone out to me. On the screen, a thick manila envelope opened to show stacks of $100 bills. Crisp and new. More money than I had seen in one place since I sold my house. The timestamp read 0 hour 47 minutes in the morning. Today's date. "I handed this to Valerie at breakfast," Matthew said. His voice had gone flat, mechanical. "I told her to bring it to you. I told her it was important. That you had sacrificed too much for too long. She said she would deliver it this afternoon." I looked at the socks on the table, then the picture, then the face of my son, which had gone white. "She came around 2 o'clock, I said slowly. She stayed in her car, handed me the bag through the window, drove off before I could invite her inside. Matthew's phone slipped from his hand. It clattered on the table. He leaned against the back of a chair, breathing raggedly through his nose. "That's $100,000, he said to the floor. $100,000. Where?" Headlights swept the window, bright enough to make both of us turn. The sound of an engine, expensive and quiet, purring to a stop outside. Through the glass, I saw a brand-new, gleaming luxury electric car pull into my driveway, the metallic blue paint shining under the street lamp. The driver's door opened. Valerie stepped out, carrying shopping bags from stores I couldn't afford to window shop at. Matthew's face did something I had never seen before. All the color drained out. Then it rushed back, dark and furious. He was out the door before I could speak, moving down the driveway in long strides that ate up the distance. I followed him, my heart hammering. "Matthew?" Valerie's smile looked painted on, too bright. "What are you two doing out here? I just swung by to grab something I left." "Where is the money I gave you for my dad?" Matthew's voice cut through her words like a knife. "The $100,000? She froze. The shopping bags rustled in her grip. "I don't know what you're talking about." "This morning, at breakfast, I handed you an envelope with $100,000 in cash. And I told you to bring it to my father for his birthday." "Oh, that?" She laughed, but it sounded wrong, too sharp. "Matthew, don't be dramatic. I delivered your gift this afternoon. Socks." I spoke for the first time, standing next to my son. "You brought me one pair of cheap socks." Valerie's eyes flicked to me, then away. "That's what you gave me to deliver. I don't know anything about—" "Show me your phone." Matthew held out his hand. "Right now. Show me the envelope." "I don't have to show you anything." Her voice rose, defensive. "How dare you accuse me in front of your father? After everything I've done for this family, that's a $100,000 car." Matthew pointed at the luxury car. "You were driving a 7-year-old compact car this morning. Where did you get that car, Valerie?" The shopping bag fell from her hands, spilling onto the driveway. Designer labels, expensive clothing, things that cost more than my monthly rent. "You want to know where I got it?" Her face twisted into something ugly. "I bought it. With my money. Money I earned dealing with your constant work schedule. Your obsession with expanding the business. Your endless devotion to—" She flung a finger toward me. "Him!" "That was my money." Matthew's voice dropped to something cold and final. That was my father's birthday gift. You stole it. Your father has taken enough from us. Valerie's voice cracked like shattering glass. You sold your house for him. You gave him everything, and he still expects more. $100,000? For what? So he can live like a king while we struggle? We are not struggling. Matthew clipped each word out, like explaining something to a child. We have a 6-bedroom house. You are driving a luxury car now. We apparently took 2 vacations last year. The only one struggling is my father, who gave up his home so I could build something. You're choosing him over me. She backed away toward the luxury car, her eyes wide. After all I've sacrificed? After supporting you through every late night, every business trip, every... Get in your car. Matthew's voice could have frozen water. We'll discuss this at home. Discuss? She let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. There's nothing to discuss. You've already made your choice. I said we'll talk about it at home. He walked toward his own car without looking back, shoulders rigid, hands clenched at his sides. The engine started. He backed out of the driveway without waiting. Valerie stood in the darkness next to her expensive new car. The shopping bags scattered at her feet like evidence at a crime scene. She looked at me once, and what I saw on her face wasn't remorse or shame, it was hatred. Then she got into the luxury car. She backed out too fast and disappeared down the street, in the opposite direction from Matthew. I stood alone in my driveway, looking at the fallen shopping bags, the spot where $100,000 had been stolen from me by someone who had sat at my table and smiled while taking my food. Inside, the cheap socks still lay on the kitchen table, $5.99. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at the socks, still where I had left them last night, watching the sunlight creep across the worn tablecloth. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Valerie's face in the driveway, twisted with hatred, shopping bags scattered at her feet like confetti at a funeral. My phone rang at 8:15. Dad? Matthew's voice sounded hollow, scraped. I stayed at a hotel last night. I couldn't be in that house with her. I straightened in my chair, gripping the edge of the table. Where are you now? Still here, at a simple hotel on the main avenue. A pause stretched between us, filled with things neither of us wanted to say. I'm filing for divorce today. I need to know, did I do the right thing? The question hung in the air like something fragile that might break if I answered wrong. Through my kitchen window, I saw a neighbor walking by with a dog. Ordinary life continued while my son's world collapsed. You did what any man of integrity would do, I said. You chose the truth. Robert Morales? He exhaled, long and shaky. That's the lawyer I'm meeting with at 10 o'clock. He was recommended to me. Good, let him handle the legal side. That's what he's trained for. I keep thinking about her face last night. The way she looked at you. His voice hardened. I married someone I didn't know at all. After we hung up, I finally dumped the cold coffee down the sink and brewed a fresh pot. The week dragged by in fragments of phone calls and waiting. Matthew sent brief text updates. Met with Morales, gathering financial records. Papers are filed tomorrow. Each message arrived like a bulletin from a distant war I couldn't see, but felt in my bones. I kept up my routines because stopping would mean surrendering to the chaos. Morning walks around the neighborhood. Grocery shopping on Tuesday, but I would stop mid-stride when my phone vibrated or lingered at my mailbox longer than necessary, looking for something I couldn't name. On the 8th day after the confrontation, March 22nd, according to the calendar I had started keeping, Matthew called during my evening walk. The papers have been served, he said without preamble. Robert says the messenger delivered the documents an hour ago. How do you feel? like I'm watching someone else's life fall apart. His voice had an edge I had never heard before. Robert warned me she'll fight hard. She's hired Janet Rivers. Apparently, she specializes in aggressive divorce tactics. Let her fight, I said, watching a crow land on a telephone wire. The facts are on your side. I hope you're right, Dad. I really hope you're right. The call came 3 hours later. I was in my living room trying to read a book I had already forgotten twice when my phone lit up with Valerie's name. I stared at the screen, considering letting it go to voicemail. But something in me needed to hear what she would say. I needed to understand what I was up against. Hello, Valerie. This is all your fault. Her voice exploded through the speaker, so loud I pulled the phone away from my ear. You poisoned Matthew against me. You couldn't stand to see him happy with someone else. I stood up, beginning to pace the small room. I kept my voice level. You stole $100,000 that was meant for me. That is not my fault. That is yours. I didn't steal anything. That money should have been invested in the business, in our future, not wasted on you. She was crying now, or pretending to. Hard to tell which. You've taken enough from us. Years of Matthew choosing you over me, putting your needs first. And now this. Valerie, I have asked my son for nothing. He chose to give me that money. You chose to take it. You think you can destroy my life and just walk away? Her voice dropped to something cold and sharp. You are going to regret meddling in my marriage. I will make sure of it. My hand tightened around the phone. Are you threatening me? Take it any way you want. The line went dead. I stood in the center of my living room, holding the silent phone, looking out at the quiet street where nothing had changed. A car drove past. The crow was still on the wire. The world kept turning while threats landed in my ear like stones. 3 days later, on March 25th, the letter arrived. I opened it standing next to my front door. Certified mail that required my signature. The sender said, Janet Rivers, attorney at law, family practice. Inside 3 pages of legal letterhead, detailed demands that made my chest tighten. I sat down at the kitchen table and read it again, this time slowly, pulling a pen from the drawer and beginning to highlight key phrases. I read the paragraph about me for the 3rd time to make sure I understood correctly. Valerie wasn't just fighting the divorce. She was coming directly after me, claiming I deliberately sabotaged their marriage, demanding money I didn't have for damages I hadn't caused. The audacity of it hit me first, then the danger. She had stolen from me, and now she was positioning herself as my victim, trying to rewrite the narrative, making herself the wronged party who deserved compensation. I looked at the cheap socks, still on the counter where I had moved them days ago. $5.99. She had stolen $100,000 and given me $5.99, and now she wanted $50,000 more. So that's how she wants to play, I said out loud to the empty kitchen. My voice sounded different, harder. Fine. Let's play. I folded the letter carefully. I slid it back into the envelope and placed it in a drawer, not hiding it, but filing it. The first piece of evidence in whatever came next. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows over my small rental house. I had spent 4 years here, making excuses, hoping things would get better, accepting less than I deserved, because I didn't want to cause my son trouble. That was over. Valerie had made it personal. She had threatened me, blamed me, tried to turn me into the villain of her story of theft and betrayal. But she had made a critical mistake. She assumed I would remain passive, assumed I would accept her version of events and fade into the background while she grabbed what she could. She didn't know me as well as she thought. I walked to my desk, pulled out a notepad, and began making a list. Evidence, witnesses, timeline, facts that could be verified, documented, proven. My years teaching history had taught me that narratives aren't built on emotion. They are built on evidence. Truth isn't what people claim. It's what they can demonstrate. If Valerie wanted a war, she would have one. But it would be fought on my terms, with my rules, using weapons she didn't know I had. The socks were gone from my kitchen counter. I had put them in a drawer 3 days ago, not out of forgiveness, but necessity. They represented the emotional wound. What I needed now was strategy. I sat down at my small desk, my laptop open, a fresh notebook beside it, and a pen that had graded 1,000 history papers. If Valerie wanted to make me the defendant in her story, I would need to build a case, not the emotional kind, the documented kind, the kind that holds up in court. I started with what was public. Valerie's social media page loaded slowly on my old computer. She had never set it to private, perhaps out of vanity or carelessness. I scrolled back through her posts, looking for anything related to the luxury car. March, mid-March. Then I found it. March 16th, the day after she stole my birthday money, the post showed her standing next to a gleaming blue luxury electric car in what was clearly a dealership showroom. Her smile stretched from ear to ear, almost manic. The caption read, "Dreams really do come true. Luxury life. My dream car. New beginnings. Blessed." I stared at the timestamp. Posted at 2 hours 47 minutes in the afternoon on March 16th, 2025, less than 24 hours after she handed me $5 socks through her car window. Document everything, I said quietly to myself, opening a folder on my desktop labeled Documentation. I took screenshots from multiple angles, making sure each one showed the date, time, and URL clearly visible. Then I scrolled more. 3 more posts that day. One from the parking lot showing the car from different angles, another from her driveway, a fourth showing the interior, leather seats, pristine, with the caption, "Worth the wait, luxury car, luxury life." I saved them all methodically, creating a timeline that Valerie herself had documented. She had been so proud, so eager to show off her new acquisition, that she had created a perfect trail of evidence linking the theft to the purchase. But social media posts alone wouldn't be enough. I needed corroboration. I carefully studied the dealership photos. The showroom had distinctive features, large windows, a specific layout of vehicles, visible signage in the reflection. I zoomed in on one image until I could make out the name. West Side Luxury Auto Dealer, with an address in the city. 2 hours later, I pulled into their parking lot. The showroom glittered with the antiseptic shine of expensive things. A young salesman approached immediately. Sensing a possible commission, I played the part he expected. Retirement age man, considering a significant purchase, researching, taking his time. "The electric model is our most popular vehicle," he said with genuine enthusiasm. "Great choice." "I noticed one in my neighborhood recently," I said, keeping my tone casual. "A lovely blue color. Really caught my eye." His face lit up. "Oh, that might have been the one we sold last week. A lady paid cash. You don't see that often with these prices." My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression mildly interested. "Cash? That's unusual these days, isn't it?" "Very much so." He leaned in as if sharing a secret. But she was determined, had it all planned out. Came in with the exact amount in an envelope. A memorable transaction, you know, most people finance. I imagine. I pointed toward the blue model in the showroom. "Well, it's certainly a beautiful car. Do you mind if I take a closer look?" I spent 20 minutes asking technical questions, taking a test drive, maintaining the fiction of a potential buyer. Before leaving, I collected a business card, making sure the salesman's name, David Evans, was clearly printed on it. Back home, I added David's card to my documentation folder and typed up detailed notes about our conversation while the memory was fresh. Date, time, direct quotes where I could remember them exactly. The unusual cash transaction, his clear recollection of her, 2 pieces of evidence. But I needed more. I remembered my birthday, Valerie's rushed visit, less than 3 minutes from arrival to departure. Someone that hurried, that eager to leave. Someone might have noticed. Caroline Miller, my neighbor 3 houses down. She spent most evenings on her front porch reading or watching the street. Had she been there on March 15th? I waited until April 1st, giving myself a few days to formulate the right approach. When I saw Caroline on her porch that afternoon, I walked down the sidewalk, carrying a small notepad. "Caroline," I called out, "do you remember my birthday? March 15th? She looked up from her book, smiling. "Of course. I saw you setting things up earlier that day. Why? Did you happen to notice when my daughter-in-law stopped by that afternoon?" Her expression changed. It became more attentive. "Yes, I did, actually. I thought it was strange. She barely stayed 5 minutes, maybe less, handed you something through the window, and drove off." I remember thinking it seemed rushed for a birthday visit. Relief and vindication washed over me in equal measure. "Would you be willing to write down what you remember?" Caroline took the notepad without hesitation. "How specific should I be?" "Just what you remember. The date, the time, if you recall it. How long she stayed." She wrote carefully, her handwriting neat and deliberate. When she finished, she dated and signed the bottom, without me even asking. "I hope this helps with whatever is going on," she said, handing the notepad back. "That visit didn't sit right with me even then. You don't treat family that way, especially on their birthday." I read her statement standing on her porch. Clear, factual, dated, and signed. The testimony of a neighbor who placed Valerie at my house for less than 5 minutes on March 15th. Contradicting any claim that she had spent time with me or properly delivered a gift. "Thank you, Caroline. You have no idea how much this means." That night, I spread the evidence on my kitchen table like puzzle pieces assembling themselves. Time-stamped social media posts showing Valerie celebrating her new luxury car on March 16th. A business card from a salesman who remembered her unusual cash purchase. A signed statement from a neighbor who witnessed her rushed and dismissive birthday visit. 3 independent sources, 3 different perspectives, all telling the same story. Valerie had stolen money meant for me and immediately spent it on herself, documenting her own crime through careless vanity. I took photographs of everything arranged together. Then I carefully filed each piece in protective sleeves in a 3-ring binder. The binder went into a filing cabinet. The filing cabinet went into my desk drawer, right next to the demand letter from Janet Rivers. This was only the beginning. I knew it. Valerie's lawyer would argue, deflect. She would try to reframe the narrative. But evidence doesn't lie. Facts don't change based on who is telling the story. I had been a history teacher for 35 years. I knew how to research, how to verify sources, how to build an argument that could stand up to scrutiny. Valerie thought she was fighting an old man who would give up and accept her version of events. She was wrong. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Matthew. "I need to speak with Robert Morales. I have evidence that could help your case." His reply came in minutes. "Call him tomorrow. I'll let him know you're reaching out." "What kind of evidence?" I typed carefully. The kind that proves she documented her own theft. She posted all of it online. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again, finally. Of course she did. I put the phone down and looked at the binder on my desk. 3 pieces of evidence. Enough to establish a pattern, support a narrative, prove that I wasn't making accusations. I was documenting facts. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew this was just the opening move. Valerie had threatened me. She had tried to make me the villain. She had demanded $50,000 for damages I didn't cause. She wanted a fight. I was giving her one, but not with anger or emotion. With documentation. With evidence. With the patient, methodical accumulation of the truth that she couldn't refute or reframe. Let her lawyer send threatening letters. Let Valerie rage and blame and play the victim. I had the proof. The binder rested on my kitchen table like a loaded weapon. 3 days had passed since my text to Matthew about the evidence. And now, on April 5th, I was reviewing everything one last time before my meeting with Robert Morales. I spread the documents on the table in chronological order. Social media screenshots showing Valerie's luxury car posts from March 16th. Clear, unequivocal timestamps. Caroline's handwritten statement, dated and signed, describing the 2-minute birthday visit. My typed notes from the dealership conversation with David Evans, with his business card stapled to the corner, and finally, a printout of Matthew's photograph. That manila envelope stuffed with $100 bills. With the timestamp from the morning of my birthday, each piece connected to the next like links in a chain. Theft, purchase, deceit, documentation. I packed everything back into the binder and drove downtown. Robert Morales' office occupied the 14th floor of a glass tower overlooking the river. His handshake was firm, professional, but his eyes widened slightly as I began pulling documents from my binder. "Mr. Arturo," he said, arranging the papers on his polished desk. "This is remarkably meticulous. Most family members in these situations react emotionally. You have approached this like a professional investigator." "I was a history teacher," I said. "Research and documentation were my profession for 30 years. He studied the social media posts, cross-referenced the timestamps, examined Caroline's statement. "This witness, your neighbor, is willing to testify if necessary?" She offered without me asking. Robert leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "This changes our strategy significantly. We were prepared to argue the theft based on Matthew's testimony and the photo, but this hits the screenshots. She documented her own crime, posted it in less than 24 hours. Arrogance, I said. Or perhaps she didn't think anyone would connect the dots. Either way, it is evidence a jury would immediately understand." He paused, looking directly at me. "The first hearing is April 10th, 5 days from now. Matthew specifically asked if you would attend for support." Something in my chest squeezed. The thought of sitting in a courtroom, watching this unfold, being in the same room as Valerie, felt like entering a gladiatorial arena. But Matthew had asked. I will be there. The morning of April 10th arrived cold and gray. I dressed in my navy suit, the one I had worn for retirement ceremonies and funerals, events that marked endings. The county courthouse stood imposing downtown, all concrete and authority. I parked in the public lot, went through security, found the right courtroom on the 3rd floor. Matthew was sitting at a table next to Robert, his posture rigid. When he saw me, his shoulders dropped slightly. Relief, or perhaps just the release of pent-up tension. I took a seat in the gallery, 3 rows back, trying to be present without being intrusive. Valerie walked in with Janet Rivers, her lawyer. She wore a conservative dress, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. The performance of an aggrieved woman. Our eyes didn't meet. She kept her gaze forward, but her shoulders carried the tension like armor. The judge, a woman in her 50s, with silver hair and reading glasses, reviewed documents as everyone settled. Then Robert stood. "Your Honor, we have clear documentation that Mrs. Valerie posted about the purchase of a vehicle on March 16th, the day after receiving $100,000 in cash intended as a gift for my client's father." He displayed the social media posts on a screen, Valerie's smiling face next to the luxury car, the hashtag celebrating her dream coming true. The timing is not a coincidence. Janet Rivers half rose. Objection, circumstantial. Denied. The judge didn't look up from the screen. "Proceed, Mr. Morales." Robert went through each piece methodically. The neighbor's statement establishing the brief birthday visit, the dealership information about an unusual cash purchase, Matthew's photograph of the original envelope, the timeline that connected every dot. I watched Valerie's back tighten with each revelation. I saw Janet lean in to whisper urgently to her. They hadn't expected this. They had assumed we only had Matthew's word against hers. Emotion versus denial. They were wrong. The judge took off her glasses. She placed them on the bench. "Given the documentation presented, I am ordering a full investigation into the financial transactions in question. Mrs. Valerie is to provide full bank records for the past 6 months. We will reconvene once that investigation is complete." The gavel fell like a door slamming shut. Outside the courtroom, Robert caught up with me in the hallway. That was better than I expected. The judge's order for a financial investigation essentially validates our claims. "So we won?" Matthew asked, hope filtering through the exhaustion. "This round, yes, but Mrs. Valerie's lawyer will not stop fighting. Prepare for escalation." Robert looked at me. "Both of you." I was driving home, windows down despite the chill because I needed air, when my phone rang. Valerie's name on the screen. I pulled over to the side of the road and answered. "You set me up." Her voice came like shattering glass. "You planned this from the start. You manipulated everything to make me look like—" "I documented what happened," I interrupted, keeping my voice level. "You stole money meant for me. That is not manipulation. It is a fact." "You think the courtroom is the only battlefield?" Her laugh was bitter, jagged. "You have no idea what's coming. You've destroyed my life? Fine. Let's see how you like it." The line went dead. I sat in my parked car on a side street in Queens, watching traffic go by. Normal people going about their normal days. The courtroom victory felt hollow suddenly, replaced by something colder. Valerie had sounded cornered. Desperate, and desperate people don't retreat. They attack from unexpected angles. I started the car and drove the rest of the way home, checking my rearview mirror more often than necessary, wondering what shape her next assault would take. The changes started small. A call to Thomas Allen, a colleague I had taught with for 15 years. It went unreturned. At the grocery store, 3 days after the hearing, my neighbor Lori waved, but didn't stop to chat as usual. Her smile was strained and brief. Coincidence, I told myself. People are busy. But the uneasiness followed me home like a shadow I couldn't quite see. On April 15th, I was working in my small garden, pulling weeds around the tomato plants I had started too early, when a car pulled up. A young woman approached, carrying a manila envelope. "Arturo Vargas?" "That's me." "You've been served." I signed her tablet, accepted the envelope, and she drove off before I could ask questions I didn't really want answered. Inside, I brushed the dirt from my hands and opened the documents on my kitchen table. Civil lawsuit. Valerie versus Arturo Vargas. My eyes scanned the page. Every line worse than the last. $75,000 in damages. Defamation, emotional distress, intentional interference with marital relations. The language painted me as a toxic, controlling father-in-law who had fabricated evidence and manipulated my son against his innocent wife. I read it twice. The accusations were outrageous, but they were also calculated, strategic, designed to make me look vengeful and obsessed. "She's trying to make me the villain of her story," I said to the empty kitchen. 3 days later, on April 18th, I sat across from Robert Morales again with the lawsuit between us. "This lawsuit is legally weak," Robert said, flipping through the pages. "It would have trouble passing muster when we have documented evidence. But that's not really the point." "What is the point?" "Pressure. She wants you to convince Matthew to settle favorably just to make this go away. It's a common aggressive divorce tactic." He closed the file. "You'll need to hire a separate attorney for this civil matter. I can recommend several good ones." I thought about my bank account, the modest teacher's pension, the costs accumulating. What if I represent myself? Robert studied me carefully. "It's legal in this state, but civil procedure is complex. Could you advise me within ethical limitations?" I could. "But Mr. Arturo," he leaned forward, "this is going to get worse before it gets better." "It's already worse," I said. "At least this way, I'm not paying someone else to tell me so." The phone call came on April 22nd. Late. My cell ringing with a number I recognized but hadn't seen in months. David Carson, who taught math in the classroom next to mine for a decade. "David, how good to hear from you." "Arturo," his voice was hesitant, "I got a strange call from your son's wife. She sounded quite upset. Said some troubling things about family interference." My hand tightened around the phone. "What exactly did she say?" "She said you've always been controlling of Matthew, that you sabotaged their marriage because you were jealous of his success." A pause. "This doesn't sound like you," but I had to ask. I stood up, began pacing my living room. "Here are the facts. She stole $100,000 my son sent me for my birthday. When he discovered the theft, he filed for divorce. Everything else is her attempt to avoid responsibility." The silence stretched long enough for me to wonder if we had been disconnected. I thought there had to be more to the story. "Thanks for being straight with me." After we hung up, I made a list. Everyone who might be on Valerie's contact list from years of family gatherings. Former colleagues, neighbors, friends I had introduced her to at retirement parties. The pen pressed harder against the paper as the names accumulated. Over the next few days, I learned she had contacted at least 6 people. Most of the calls followed the same pattern. She was the victim. I was manipulative. Matthew was under my control. Some who knew me well immediately dismissed her. Others, like Lori at the grocery store, were unsure what to believe. The isolation hurt worse than the lawsuit. Decades of building a reputation for being fair and decent, undermined by someone willing to systematically lie to anyone who would listen. I was sitting at my kitchen table, looking at the list of names, when my laptop dinged with an incoming video call. Matthew's face filled the screen, and he looked terrible, exhausted, angry, something desperate around his eyes. "Dad, I just heard about the lawsuit, and I've been getting calls. People asking me questions about you, about our relationship." His voice cracked slightly. "She's trying to destroy you. She's trying to pressure us into settling," I said. "It's strategy. This is insane. I should just give her what she wants and end this." "No." I leaned toward the screen. "That is exactly what she wants. We don't negotiate with people who steal and then lie about it. We see this through to the end. But she's hurting you, your friends, your reputation." "I've handled worse," I lied. "We stay the course." Matthew rubbed his face with both hands. I never thought she would go this far. Attacking you personally. Lying to people you've known for years. What kind of person does that? The desperate kind, I said. The kind who knows they are losing. After the call ended, I sat in the blue glow of my laptop screen, thinking about Valerie's tactics. The lawsuit was theater, designed to intimidate. The social campaign was more sophisticated, aimed at isolating me, making me toxic by association, hoping I would convince Matthew to settle just to stop the bleeding. But isolation only works if you believe you are alone. I opened my email and began drafting messages to the people on my list. Not defending myself, not arguing, just stating facts. The timeline, the evidence, the court's preliminary ruling, letting them decide what to believe based on documentation rather than emotion. Some wouldn't respond, some wouldn't care, but others would read closely. They would compare Valerie's story with mine, and they would recognize which one stood up to scrutiny. By midnight, I had sent 11 emails. My eyes burned from the screen, but something in my chest felt lighter. Not exactly hope, more like determination crystallized into purpose. Valerie wanted to make me the villain. She wanted me isolated, desperate, willing to give up just to end the attacks. She had miscalculated. I wasn't the giving up type. I never had been. 35 years in a classroom had taught me that truth, presented clearly and consistently, tends to win over lies in the long run. Not always immediately, not without cost. But eventually, people recognize which story makes sense and which one requires them to believe the improbable. I closed my laptop and looked at the lawsuit on the table. $75,000 for emotional damages I hadn't caused. Let her file the suit. Let her lie to my friends. Let her paint me as controlling and vengeful. I had documentation, I had witnesses, I had facts that could be verified by anyone willing to look. And most importantly, I had something Valerie didn't have. The patience to see this through to the end. No matter how long it took or how much damage she tried to inflict along the way. She had started a war she couldn't win. She just didn't know it yet. 3 days after sending those emails, I sat at my desk with a fresh notebook, deliberately pushing the social war out of my mind. Hurt feelings wouldn't win this fight. Evidence would. I drew a line down the center of the page. Left column, what I know. Right column, what I need to know. On the left, I wrote down everything I could remember about Valerie's spending habits during her marriage to Matthew. The designer handbags she had casually mentioned at holiday dinners, the spa weekends, the comments about great investment opportunities she never fully explained. At the time, I had assumed Matthew's business success supported this lifestyle. Now, those memories felt different, like clues I had overlooked. On the right, I wrote one question. Where did all the money go? April 28th, I called Robert Morales. Can we get her full bank records? I asked. There's more here than just the stolen $100,000. Through the court's financial investigation? Absolutely. That's exactly what discovery is for. I'll file the request today. Papers rustled in the background. How long? Generally a week, maybe less. The state courts move fairly quickly on these matters when there is documented fraud. The envelope arrived on May 3rd, thick, official. It contained 2 years of bank statements from the joint account Matthew and Valerie had shared. I brewed coffee, cleared my kitchen table completely, pulled out my highlighters and my notebook. Then I started reading. The first few months looked normal. Groceries, utilities, gas stations, the rhythm of ordinary life. But then patterns emerged like shapes in the fog. Cash withdrawals, not enormous amounts. $500 here, $800 there, but frequent, too frequent. I used a yellow highlighter for every cash withdrawal. By the time I finished the first year, The statements looked like they had been attacked by a particularly aggressive bee. I started making lists. Dates, amounts. No explanations appeared on the statements, just ATM withdrawal repeated like an accusation. By the time I reached the most recent statements, my hand was cramped from writing. I stood up, stretched, looked at what I had documented. In 24 months, Valerie had withdrawn over $35,000 in cash, with no record of what it was spent on. But the discovery that made me set down my coffee and just stare was on page 47. March 8th. Luxury auto dealer, $5,000, listed as vehicle deposit. I walked to my calendar on the wall. I counted backward from March 15th, my birthday. The day Matthew gave Valerie the $100,000 meant for me. 1 week. Exactly 1 week before receiving the money, she had placed a down payment on the car. She planned this, I said to my empty kitchen. The whole thing was calculated. The theft wasn't an impulse. It wasn't a moment of weakness or bad judgment. She had already committed to buying that luxury car before Matthew handed her the money. The $100,000 merely allowed her to complete a purchase she had orchestrated in advance. This changed everything. I spent the next 2 days organizing the evidence, creating a timeline with highlighted sections, cross-referencing transactions. On May 6th, I drove to Robert Morales' office carrying a binder that had grown substantially thicker. $35,000 in unexplained cash withdrawals, Robert said, flipping through the statements, his professional composure cracking slightly. In 2 years. And the luxury car deposit before she even had the money. I slid the March 8th statement across his desk. This was not impulse. This was a plan. Robert studied the document, his finger tracing the date. This changes everything. When we present this at the next hearing, we won't just be showing she stole your birthday gift. We'll be showing a pattern of financial deception throughout the marriage. Premeditation. Systematic depletion of marital assets. He looked at me, and something in his expression had shifted from professional respect to genuine admiration. You have built a case any prosecutor would envy, he said. Most clients' family members become emotional and reactive. You became methodical and thorough. I was a history teacher, I reminded him. Primary sources, documentation, verification. It's what I know how to do. Well, it's about to pay off. Robert began taking notes on a legal pad. The next hearing is scheduled for May 12th, 6 days from now. Judge Campos will see this evidence, and it will be very difficult for Valerie's lawyer to explain a deposit made before the money was stolen. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Genuine hope. Not the desperate kind that comes from wishing things would get better, but the earned kind that comes from building something solid. Evidence. Documentation. Facts that couldn't be refuted or reframed. Valerie had been careless. She documented her own crimes, first with social media posts about the luxury car, now with financial records that showed she had planned the purchase before the theft. Her arrogance, her certainty that no one would look closely enough or care enough to investigate. She had created a paper trail that led directly to her guilt. The civil lawsuit she had filed against me suddenly felt less threatening. Let her claim I had defamed her or interfered in her marriage. I had bank statements that showed systematic financial misconduct. I had dates that proved premeditation. I had a timeline that couldn't be manipulated or denied. At home I made dinner, something simple. Pasta with vegetables, and I ate at my kitchen table, surrounded by organized folders of evidence. The cheap socks were long gone in some drawer, irrelevant now. What mattered was the documentation, the truth, the patient accumulation of facts that would speak louder than any accusation or lie. May 12th was 6 days away. 6 days until Valerie sat in a courtroom and watched her carefully constructed lies collapse under the weight of her own financial records. I cleared my dishes, put away the folders, and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Not victory? Not yet. But the certainty that I had done the work necessary to achieve it. Whatever happened in that courtroom, I would be ready. May 12th arrived with gray skies and a threat of rain. I dressed in my navy suit for the third time, checked my wallet for parking money, and reviewed my notes one last time at my kitchen table. The file containing all the financial evidence rested next to my coffee cup. Though I wouldn't need to carry it, Robert had everything prepared. The drive downtown felt different this time, less anxious. More like a soldier heading to a battle he knew he could win because he had done the reconnaissance, understood the terrain, prepared properly. I found the same parking spot I had used before, went through the same security check, climbed the same stairs to the third-floor courtroom. But when I walked in and took my seat in the gallery, my posture was different, straighter, more confident. Matthew was sitting at the attorney's table next to Robert, his shoulders tense with focus. When he looked back and saw me, something in his face relaxed slightly. I nodded once. We were here. We were ready. Valerie walked in with Janet Rivers, and I watched her carefully. She wore a conservative gray suit, her hair pulled back severely, minimal makeup, the costume of someone trying to appear aggrieved and dignified. But there was tension in her jaw, a tightness around her eyes. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know what. Judge Campos took her place promptly at 9 o'clock. We are here for the continuation of the hearing in the Vargas case regarding the financial investigation ordered by this court. Mr. Morales, you may proceed. Robert stood, and even his posture communicated controlled confidence. Your Honor, the financial investigation has revealed a pattern of misconduct far beyond the original theft we documented. He gestured, and the courtroom screen lit up with the first bank statement. Transactions highlighted in yellow. Over a 24-month period, Mrs. Valerie withdrew more than $35,000 in cash from the marital account. These withdrawals have no corresponding documentation, no explanation, and no record of legitimate expense. The screen changed, showing page after page of highlighted withdrawals. I saw Valerie's shoulders tighten. I saw Janet Rivers lean in to whisper urgently. However, Your Honor, the most significant piece of evidence is this. Robert's laser pointer highlighted a single transaction. March 8th, 7 days before Mr. Arturo Vargas's birthday. Mrs. Valerie made a $5,000 deposit to the luxury auto dealer. He paused, letting the date sink in. This proves the vehicle purchase was planned before she received the $100,000 intended for Mr. Vargas's father. This was not impulse. This was calculation. This was premeditated theft. Janet Rivers stood quickly. Your Honor, Mrs. Valerie's use of marital funds during the marriage was entirely legal. Counsel, Judge Campos's voice cut the objection like a knife. We are not discussing marital funds. We are discussing money that never legally belonged to your client. It was stolen before it reached its intended recipient. Janet sat down faster than she had stood up. The judge reviewed the documents in silence, her expression unreadable. I watched Valerie's hands grip the edge of the table, knuckles white. I saw her lean into her lawyer, say something I couldn't hear. I saw Janet shake her head slightly, as if saying there was nothing she could do. Finally, Judge Campos spoke. The evidence presented demonstrates not only the theft of the $100,000, but a pattern of financial misconduct and premeditated deception. She looked directly at Valerie. Mrs. Valerie is hereby ordered to reimburse the full amount, $100,000, to Mr. Arturo Vargas, the intended recipient of that gift. Matthew's shoulders slumped with relief. I felt a tightness release in my own chest. Furthermore, the judge continued, this demonstrated bad faith significantly impacts her claims regarding the division of marital assets. The majority of her demands are denied. She will receive what is legally equitable, given her documented dishonesty. But this court will not reward financial deceit. The gavel fell. Valerie stood mechanically as the court adjourned, gathering her papers with hands that trembled slightly. She did not look at Matthew. She did not look toward the gallery where I was sitting. She just moved toward the exit like someone in shock. Janet Rivers following, trying to speak to her while Valerie seemed not to hear. In the hallway, Matthew found me immediately. Dad, we did it. The judge saw the truth. This is a big step, I said cautiously. But her lawsuit against me is still pending. We're not finished yet. After today, Matthew shook his head. She has to drop it now. She has to see she can't win. I thought about Valerie's face as she left the courtroom. The shock, the disbelief, but also something harder underneath. Something that looked less like acceptance and more like barely contained fury. People like Valerie don't give up easily, I said. Robert joined us, looking satisfied but professional. This is as decisive a ruling as we could have hoped for. The financial investigation paid off. He looked directly at me. Your work on this made the difference. That March deposit, that was the detail that proved the premeditation. Now we wait to see if she withdraws the civil suit, I said. Or if she's foolish enough to follow through. Robert's tone suggested he thought the latter was more likely. We walked out of the courthouse together, the gray sky finally breaking into rain. I pulled up my jacket collar, felt the cold drops on my face, and allowed myself a moment of genuine satisfaction. The judge had ordered Valerie to pay back the $100,000. She had rejected the majority of Valerie's property claims. She had called out the pattern of financial deceit publicly on the record. This was vindication. This was justice beginning to unfold as it should. But as I drove home in the rain, the windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm, I couldn't shake the image of Valerie's face in that courtroom. Shock? Yes. Defeat, certainly. But underneath both, something that looked dangerously like resolve. She still had her civil suit against me, $75,000 in claimed damages. Her lawyer might advise dropping it after today's catastrophic hearing. Any reasonable person would. But Valerie had never struck me as particularly reasonable. I parked in my driveway, sat for a moment, watching the rain run down the windows. I prepared for whatever came next. We had won a major battle today. The evidence had spoken. The judge had ruled decisively in our favor. But the war might not be over. Some people knew when to surrender. Others just kept fighting, even when the ground beneath them had already crumbled. I had a feeling Valerie was the latter kind. The week after the divorce hearing, the victory felt strange, quiet, like standing after a storm, checking for damage, finding everything still standing. But one threat remained. Valerie's civil lawsuit demanding $75,000 for emotional damages I hadn't caused. On May 20th, I sat at my desk organizing my defense for the hearing scheduled for May 25th. Robert Morales couldn't officially represent me in civil court. Conflict of interest, he had explained. But he had spent an hour on the phone walking me through the strategy for self-representation. Keep it factual, he had said. You're not a lawyer, so don't try to sound like one. Just tell the truth. The truth is all I've done in this situation, I had replied. The truth is my only defense because it is my only weapon, and a powerful one. The divorce court already validated everything I found. I spread my documents on the desk. The written decision from the divorce court on May 12th. my organized timeline of evidence gathering, copies of everything I had provided Robert for Matthew's case. Then I opened my desk drawer and pulled out something I had kept secure for weeks. A small digital voice recorder. After Valerie's first threatening phone call, the one where she had warned me I would regret this, I had started recording our conversations. State law allows one-party consent recording when there is a reasonable belief of threats or harassment. Her voice saying she would destroy Matthew and me gave me that reasonable belief. I connected the recorder to my laptop, transferred the files, and listened with headphones one last time. Her voice came through clearly, venomous and threatening. This was the person claiming to be my victim. On May 25th, I walked into the civil courtroom alone. No lawyer at my side. Just folders of documentation and a portable speaker in my briefcase. Valerie sat at the plaintiff's table with Janet Rivers, who stood to present her case first. Her voice conveyed theatrical indignation as she described a controlling father-in-law who had maliciously destroyed an innocent woman's marriage through fabricated evidence and manipulation. I sat quietly, taking occasional notes, but mostly just observing, watching the performance, waiting for my turn. When Janet finished, the judge looked at me. "Mr. Vargas, your response?" I stood up, moved to the podium with my notes, and addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, I gathered evidence of a theft. My son sent me $100,000 for my birthday. His wife kept it and bought herself a car. These are facts, proven in divorce court." I motioned toward my documentation. I did not fabricate anything. I documented what actually happened and provided it through the proper legal channels to my son's attorney. I walked through my evidence gathering step by step. Social media posts, public information, neighbor testimony, voluntary statement, dealership conversation, legal investigation, bank records obtained through court-ordered discovery. Everything I found was verified as truthful by Judge Campos in the divorce proceeding, I said. I am not defending myself against accusations of lying, because the truth has already been established in a separate court. Then I pulled the portable speaker from my briefcase. However, there is one piece of evidence I would like the court to hear. After the first divorce hearing, Mrs. Valerie called me. I legally recorded these calls under the state's one-party consent law, which allows recording when there is a reasonable belief of threats. I keyed my phone to the speaker and hit play. Valerie's voice filled the courtroom, sharp and clear. "You think you can destroy my life and just walk away? You are going to regret meddling in my marriage. I will make sure of it. I will destroy you and Matthew, both of you, if I have to." The recording continued for 30 seconds. When it finished, I looked at the judge. I legally recorded these calls following her first threat. Who was truly threatening whom, Your Honor? I returned to my seat. The judge made notes. Valerie's face had gone pale. "I will issue a written ruling within 72 hours, the judge said. 3 days later, on May 28th, the decision arrived in the mail. I read it standing in my kitchen, the coffee cooling on the counter. The lawsuit was dismissed. Completely. The judge's language was precise and damning. The claims lacked merit, appeared retaliatory in nature, and constituted a potential abuse of the judicial system to punish someone for providing truthful evidence. Furthermore, Valerie was ordered to pay my court costs, $3,500. I set the document down carefully and walked to my window. The street outside looked ordinary. Cars driving by, neighbors walking dogs, life continuing its normal pace. But something fundamental had changed. Every legal battle was over, every threat neutralized, every accusation answered with documented truth. Valerie had attempted to make me the villain through lies, lawsuits, and social warfare. The courts had responded by validating everything I had documented and penalizing her for the attempt. This was not revenge. This was justice working exactly as it should, slowly, methodically, but inevitably reaching the truth. I called Matthew that evening. "It's over," I said. "The civil suit was dismissed. She has to pay my costs." The silence on the other end lasted long enough for me to think we had disconnected. Then I heard him exhale, long and shaky. "You saved me, Dad. From everything. The money, the marriage, all of it. I just documented what was real," I said. "The truth did the rest." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with the order of dismissal in front of me. 4 months ago, I had been at this same table opening a gift bag containing $5 socks, feeling forgotten and diminished. Now I sat with court documents that vindicated everything I had fought for. The transformation wasn't about the legal wins, though they mattered. It was about reclaiming something essential. The confidence that I could protect what mattered. That justice was not just a concept, but something achievable through patience, documentation, and the refusal to surrender to lies. Outside, the setting sun cast long shadows over my rental home. I had one more thing to look forward to. The $100,000 Valerie had been ordered to return, plus the $3,500 in costs from this lawsuit. $103,500. But more important than the money was what it represented. Consequences delivered, justice served, and a fundamental fairness restored to a situation that had begun with cruel deceit. I could wait. I had proven I was good at it. The final divorce hearing on June 5th was a formality. Judge Campos reviewed the terms one last time, making all the previous rulings into a binding decree. I sat in the gallery, my usual seat, watching the conclusion of a battle that had consumed 4 months of my life. Valerie received $40,000 from the sale of the marital home. That was it. Everything else, Matthew's business, his investments, his future, remained his, and she owed me $103,500. The judge addressed the practical problem directly. Mrs. Valerie clearly cannot pay this amount immediately. Therefore, she is ordered to sell the luxury electric car within 10 days, and the proceeds will be paid directly to Mr. Arturo Vargas. The remaining balance will be paid in monthly installments over 24 months at the standard judgment interest rate. I watched Valerie's shoulders slump. The car that symbolized her betrayal would be the first thing she surrendered to pay for it. There was a poetry to that. On June 20th, a certified check arrived by registered mail. $30,000, the proceeds from the luxury car sale, minus what she still owed on the loan. I stood in my kitchen holding the check, and for a long moment, I didn't look at the amount. I only felt the weight of what it represented. Justice fulfilled. Consequences delivered. A fundamental fairness restored. It was never about the money, I said quietly to my empty kitchen. It was about what was right. And now, it was right. 5 days later, Matthew and I met for lunch at a nice restaurant in a part of Queens. The first truly relaxed meal we had shared since my birthday. When he walked in and we hugged, both of us held on for an extra moment. The stress that had etched lines into his face for months had lifted. He looked younger, lighter. "Dad, I don't know how to thank you." He sat across from me, his hands wrapped around a glass of water. "You saved me from the biggest mistake of my life. If you hadn't documented everything, gathered that evidence—" "I did what any father would do," I interrupted gently. "I protected my family." We ordered. We talked about ordinary things, his work, my garden, the weather turning warmer. Conversation that didn't revolve around lawyers or court dates or evidence. It felt like breathing freely after being underwater. Then Matthew put down his fork and looked at me seriously. I want to help you buy a house, a real one, not a rental. You sold yours for me. Now let me do this for you. I'll make it right this time. Something warm spread through my chest, not just from the offer, but the recognition behind it. He understood what I had sacrificed, what I had lost to help him build his business. I accept, I said, but on one condition. We document everything properly, official agreement, written terms. Not because I don't trust you, but because we both learned that documentation protects everyone. Matthew smiled, and it was genuine. Agreed. Everything in writing. Signatures, witnesses, the whole deal. He paused. You taught me that lesson the hard way, but I learned it. I pulled out my notebook, the same kind I had used during my investigation, and made a note. We both smiled at that, a shared understanding of wisdom, hard won. The afternoon sun slanted through the restaurant window, turning everything golden. He moved out today, he said, trying to start fresh in another state. Robert mentioned it. Matthew's voice was neutral. It doesn't matter where she goes. Those court records are public. That's not my revenge, I said. Those are just consequences. I didn't destroy her life. She did it herself the moment she chose theft over honesty. We finished lunch slowly, neither of us in a hurry to leave. This moment, father and son, threat removed, future bright, was worth savoring. 4 months ago, I had been alone at a table set for one, opening cheap socks. Now I sat across from my son, planning a shared future built on trust and proper documentation. When we finally stood to leave, Matthew hugged me again. I love you, Dad. I'm sorry it took almost losing everything to show me how much you matter. You never lost me, I said. I was always here. Driving home, I thought about everything that had happened since March 15th. The theft, the confrontation, the investigation, the court battles, the vindication. A journey from victim to strategist to survivor. But the real transformation wasn't about evidence or legal wins. It was about reclaiming something essential. The confidence that I could protect what mattered. That justice, while requiring patience and documentation, and refusing to surrender, was achievable. I parked outside my rental house, soon to be replaced by something I would actually own again. I walked inside, made coffee, sat at my kitchen table where this whole journey had begun. The cheap socks were long gone, discarded or donated somewhere. They didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the stack of legal documents on my desk that proved this truth. Truth, when carefully documented and properly presented, defeats lies every time. Valerie would be paying installments for 2 years. Every month, a reminder of consequences. Every payment, proof that theft has a price. But I wouldn't dwell on that. I wouldn't waste energy on anger or bitterness. She had made her choices. The courts had delivered the appropriate consequences. My job was to move forward, toward the house Matthew would help me buy, toward the years that remained, toward a future built on wisdom earned the hard way. I stood by my window as night approached, watching the shadows lengthen over my quiet street. The journey from birthday victim to vindicated survivor had taken 4 months, but it had given me back something more valuable than the money. My dignity, my confidence, my certainty that I could face injustice and respond not with rage, but with methodical, documented truth. That was worth more than $100,000. That was worth everything.